Hi, everybody. So we are about to have an amazing talk from Anzie Huynh. Is that the right way to say it?
Huynh.
You can about the toxicity in the games industry. She's works with Bryter, and they've done an amazing survey about it, and the issues that obviously are happening these days within the industry. So I'm going to pass it over to Anzie, who will lead it. Any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will have a Q&A at the end. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending the session today. So my name is Anzie, and I'm a market researcher at Bryter, and I'll be going through some of the insights from our female gamer survey. In particular, I'll be focusing on the abuse and toxicity that gamers can experience, and we feel that it's important to highlight just how toxic some behavior can be. However, as you can imagine, some of the behavior and verbal abuse that players experience can be quite graphic and touch on sensitive topics. So while it's hard to view, it is the reality of what players are receiving, and it really highlights why it must be addressed. So before I start, I just wanted to flag that some of the content I'll be sharing today may be distressing. Just a quick background about the study. This is the third year that we've conducted this study, and the data was collected in February. In terms of where this all came about, this study was born out of discussion with a client who was looking for data on female gamers, and they were really struggling to find anything that looked into this audience in much detail. And a lot has changed since then. Even in the short 3 years that we've run this, we've seen a lot more demand from clients for this type of data. And even as we conduct more research, whether it's surveying or focus groups, we're really starting to see a shift in the gender makeup of our research participants. We also make adjustments every year to the survey based on the feedback that we get. So if there's anything you want to know more about, or there's a topic that you think we could cover in the future, definitely let myself or one of our team at Bryter know. In terms of who we actually spoke to and who we sampled, it was a very broad group of gamers. We wanted to capture the wider gaming market. And so we spoke to 2,000 gamers across the US and the UK. There were a mix of console and PC players, and they were a mix of ages. And off the back of research feedback that we received, this is the first year that we also spoke to male gamers to understand their experiences. And I'll share some of these differences that we saw between males and females as well. So the study covers a few areas, including general gaming behaviors, mobile behaviors, attitudes within the gaming industry itself. But as I mentioned previously, I will focus on the abuse and the toxic behavior that gamers experience. If you're interested in the other topics, definitely reach out after, and I can share that with you. First, we wanted to understand where players were playing. So when it comes to gaming, we found that 1 in 3 female gamers only game alone and offline. This is significantly different to males, who are less likely to do this, and they're actually more likely to play online multiplayers or play offline with their friends. We also asked a question around whether or not people saw themselves as gamers and would identify as a gamer, and we found that females were much more reluctant to call themselves gamers despite playing quite frequently. So when we profiled these players, they actually played on average around 8 hours per week, so pretty frequent, and in our eyes that they should be identified as gamers. And as you can see, there are differences in behavior and attitude. And what we really wanted to understand was if there were any factors driving female players offline. For example, are they intimidated by the toxic behaviors that are often associated with gaming? Do they not feel good enough to play with others or against others? And this led us to take a deep dive into the topic of abuse and discrimination. So on the left-hand side, we have the female data in light blue, and on the right-hand side, we have the male data in dark blue. And what we found was that there were similar levels of abuse experienced between males and females. We can see that roughly 3 in 5 of gamers have experienced abuse at some point, with just under a third receiving some form of abuse regularly. We also found that abuse happened most regularly while playing online and also on online forums and discussions. There was actually also abuse being received while playing offline with friends, with 31% of females experiencing this and 25% of males receiving this. However, we really start to see the differences when we look at the types of abuse that gamers are receiving. So just to explain some of the symbols on the slide. So the green arrow means that the figure is statistically significant. So it's significantly different to the other gender. So going from left to right, both males and females receive verbal abuse from gamers while playing online multiplayer, with males receiving significantly more of this type of abuse. Males are also significantly more likely to receive negative action in online games. And this abuse actually moves onto other platforms, with roughly 1 in 5 receiving online abuse outside of gameplay, and it even moves offline, where 1 in 5 receive verbal abuse offline. For females, they are significantly more likely to be excluded from participation because of their gender. They're also more likely to experience sexually inappropriate behavior, ranging from being sent inappropriate content and being sexually harassed. And what's really shocking is that 7% of females receive threats of rape from other players, and males also receive a similar level of rape threats. And what I'm going to do next is share with you some verbatims from of some of the abuse that our respondents said that they received when we asked them about the worst thing that has happened to them or that the worst thing they've experienced. So just another reminder that some of this content may be quite distressing. So for male gamers, they commonly experience foul and aggressive language. For example, abusive language, like "I hope you get cancer," being called an idiot for defending a female gamer. Things like death and suicide threats, telling someone that they should commit suicide for the sake of gamers and humanity. And it can get quite dark, threatening to rape other family members. And what we found particularly shocking was someone reporting that they were told by a 12-year-old that if they shot him in Battlefield again, that he would rape their mother. There are also instances of racial and homophobic slurs, with people following others from lobby to lobby, throwing racial slurs at them, or being made fun of for their sexual orientation. For females, they receive a lot of sexist comments, things like, you should stick to what you're good at, like the household stuff, leave the complicated computers and games to the men who know what to do in these kinds of situations and in this topic. Reacting negatively to game accomplishments, so saying things like, your stats are only so good because obviously you have your boyfriend playing for you. There is no way a woman could be this good at a game. And it often goes so much darker and threatening places as well. So threats of violence and sexual harassment. And what's really horrifying is that it can go offline as well. So being stalked at home and being peppered with voicemails and text messages threatening rape. So what does this actually do? What sort of impact is this having on females? 50% say that they feel like they have to practice more before joining an online or multiplayer game, which is significantly different to males. 14% say that they avoid online multiplayers, again, significantly higher than males. Just under 1 in 3 female players playing online say that they don't often reveal that they're female. And also around a third of females say that they avoid speaking online in multiplayer players for fear of a negative reaction, which is significantly higher than the 28% of males that feel the same way. And I think for us, what was quite interesting was that there are a sizable number of males who also feel the same way, that they don't want to speak online for the fear of negative reaction. And this toxic behavior is so impactful that 1 in 4 female gamers actually say that it makes them want to not play again. So how well is this actually being addressed in game? And what's the perception out there on the support that players get? Unfortunately, there's still some way to go. This year, we found that 20% of female gamers felt that there were adequate processes in place to deal with abuse and discrimination in gaming, but this has actually dropped since last year. We also looked at male gamers and asked them how they felt about the presence of adequate processes, and only 1 in 3 felt that there were adequate processes in place. So what can we do moving forward? So last year at the Women in Games conference, we ran a workshop around tackling toxicity, and the people who attended the workshop discussed their own experiences of toxicity in gaming, both when playing and within the industry itself. And we worked with them to brainstorm ideas on how to tackle this toxic and abusive behavior. Now, there's no silver bullet, there's no definitive solution, and there's definitely no one-size-fits-all solution. As you can imagine, with something like this, it requires a very large shift across many areas. But some of the ideas that were generated were around in-game mechanics, so rewarding positive behavior, having clear reporting processes, having clear warnings and consequences, and utilizing more technology and investing more in moderation. Within the industry itself at a corporate level, having clear and transparent positions and action plans on this type of behavior, having clear social conduct rules, investment in support programs, and having companies praising players and employees. There's also a lot we can do together as a community as well. Education is one that is quite interesting. Education is not just within the gaming environment, but it's equally important to have education outside of this. So, for example, having early education in schools, teaching young players on the dangers of social media and gaming and what to do if they're in certain situations. Having resources to help parents and teachers, very clearly defining what is unacceptable behavior and reforming abusers. So what we mean by that is really explaining to people why their behavior is unacceptable and teaching them about the real impact that their behavior is having on others. And as a community, things like encouraging self-regulation, having community moderators and ambassadors, and having community endorsements. That's all from me for today. Thank you for listening. I hope it was insightful for you. And if you're interested in learning more, definitely reach out to myself or one of the team at Bryter. Thank you.
Hi, Anzie. That was a fantastic talk. I know there's loads of questions already in the chat, and you know it's something that's just so important at the moment. So the first question I've got is from Kristen, which is, I guess, asking more of an opinion, but do you think the term girl gamer is helpful or hurtful when it comes to female inclusion into the world of gaming?
Oh, that's a very good question.
It is.
And a very tough one to answer. I think it goes two ways. I think it's really around how we use the term and how you really approach it, right? So if you kind of go, I'm a girl gamer, hear me roar, you boys are, just not as good as we are, or, you're creating more of that divide again by using that term, then I feel that maybe that's not the right way to go about it. But if you're using it in terms of supporting each other and using it in a more kind of inclusive way and basically educating others that this is a term and this is a normal thing, that's quite a positive term to use.
No, that's good. So Mags has said, do you think that some women basically preemptively don't go on mic or try to appear non-female so they don't encounter this kind of abuse?
Sure. So some of the data does show that females do avoid going online and showing that. And I guess anecdotally, that's something I know that some of my friends do as well. And in the general research that we've done, we see this all the time.
No, I can imagine. Actually, we had a talk yesterday from someone who did a My Story, and they said they hide underneath their husband's profile often when playing things like Battlefield and things. So I can totally understand that. Viviane has said about where was the research done? But I think America did say it was UK and US.
Yes, so yeah, UK and the US, and an even mix of males and females.
Fantastic. So Josh has asked, do you ask or have you considered a female gamers identify with a separate female gamer identity as a rejection of the stereotypical masculine gamer identity?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, of course. So Josh has said, do you ask or have you considered if female gamers identify with a separate female gamer identity as a rejection of the stereotypical masculine gamer identity?
That's a really good question. It's something that we haven't done a lot of research into, but I think it's something we could definitely consider looking at. It's one of those things that we'd love to deep dive into more, because as you can imagine, our study is quite broad at the moment, and having any suggestions on where to deep dive.
I can imagine. Yeah, and the games industry is so large, so there is so much there. And actually, this leads to Joelle's comment, which is your talk was about games in general. Did you do a specific insight into esports and competitive games? If so or not, do you ever think that the behaviour might be more prominent in such games, and why?
So we haven't done anything specifically into esports. I think it's something that we would like to explore, just considering how it goes. Sorry, apologies. Slipped my mind. It is included in the full report. We did do a bit of a dip, but I think moving forward, if there is to go into it a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, women in games, I mean, we hear about these things as well, and we definitely know esports is sort of something else that people really find that there is that toxicity, and maybe even in a greater capacity. So Meg has actually said, I just want to say, because of her comments, you can see it, that she said, as much as she's experienced these things, it is actually really, quite different seeing it all written down, and I can imagine you get that quite a bit.
Oh, exactly, definitely. It's one of those things that, you just kind of, even speaking to my male colleagues about it, they know what's happening, but when you actually see it right there in front of you, in your face, it really prompts you to actually stop and think about, what needs to change and what needs to happen moving forward.
Yeah, unfortunately, talk is cheap sometimes, isn't
Exactly.
it? People throw away comments. But Ruth has asked, do you think some of these issues, exclusion and verbal abuse, can transfer over to online learning communities?
What do you? Sorry, I just wanted to clarify what you meant by online learning. Did you say
learning communities? Yeah. So, I mean, Ruth is in education side of it. So I suppose it's sort of, does it carry on over to other communities? Sort of. Do you know what, Ruth? Do you want to message me and expand, and we can go from there? She should be online, so that's all good. Sorry, I'm just going through the questions. I mean, there's lots of comments about from people just sort of saying that they notice that actually saying you're a gamer, people, particularly being female, they get really bombarded with questions, and it's almost like you have to live up to a higher standard. I don't know whether you found that as well with things that when you talk to people, that you're expected to know everything. They're tested that you're actually a gamer.
Yeah, I think that's something that doesn't just happen in gaming. I think it happens quite generally as a female. It's definitely something that needs to be worked on.
Oh, totally. And some people have asked about the report. So it's on your website. It's on Bryter website, or is it possible available at all?
I believe it is. Let me double check with our team to see where you can access that, and I will definitely share that with you.
Yeah, and there's also discussion as well about really interested in sort of the tools to stop abuse. I know that there are different tools being done, and someone sort of said about Blizzard's approach to. Have you seen many companies doing that, sort of trying to create these tools to try and stop the abuse directly?
Yeah, so there are companies who are trying things out. As you can imagine, these things do take time, and they actually need quite a bit of testing as well. So say, for example, what Riot has done around their testing of different messaging, we have seen those types of things being done. In terms of whether or not they're impactful, I think it just needs to be in market a bit longer, and we need to do some more analysis in that area.
Great. Right, Faye has also asked, how does your data take into consideration non-binary genders? Is that difficult to collate?
It's quite difficult to collate just because of how surveying works, and how the smaller sample sizes that we get. Is quite hard to get robust data in that area, but we do definitely try to provide options for people to answer their gender and what they identify with as accurately as possible.
Great. And Evie has asked, what examples can you maybe give of how gameplay and game systems themselves can counter toxicity? So, I mean, you talked about Blizzard, obviously, trying different things. Is there anything beyond that one you've seen, or is that the best one? Or we talked about Activision.
Yep. I think those, not that I've come across. So I think those are the biggest ones that are more well known.
Great, thank you. Helena has asked, is there any correlation between different kinds of game mechanisms and abusive behaviours? So have you seen that, certain types of games and certain types of abusive behaviour?
Right. I don't think we've done a lot of research into this area. We do see that this behaviour does happen across all genres of games, but as we can see in the data with online multiplayer, it does happen quite a lot.
Yes, and that's amazing, really, that it is across all types, rather than, I think, people very much think, oh, it is those kind of fiercely competitive games, but, that it's quite sad that it goes across everything. And someone said, is there data on games reporting the behaviour they've experienced? I mean, where do they report? Do you get any data on that that they've done it? Sorry, do you get the data about them actually reporting the bad behaviour? Do you ever have that as well? I mean,
right.
Any data on that?
So data directly from the. Unfortunately, that's something that we don't collect. It's something we can look to adjust and capture in the survey next year. I think with things like data privacy and things like that, it can get quite difficult.
Totally, I can imagine. We've had so many comments as well. I'm trying to go through all the comments with the questions. And I think it's something that really resonates with everyone. I think it's, a lot of people have experienced abuse online and everything. So, when do you start doing the next survey? Because obviously, is this an annual thing, and you're obviously expanding it? It'd be quite interesting in the chat if people also put in the bits they'd like to hear. I think that's probably useful for you, as in sort of the sides of it, of where is the next steps. Are there things you're planning to add for next year's report?
Sure. So the next wave of research will be in February. I think what we'll look to do, and obviously this isn't set in stone, and any feedback that we get would be greatly appreciated. We'll continue sampling males as well to understand their experience. I think it could be quite interesting to understand what's happened during COVID and the lockdown. As you can imagine, gaming behaviours have changed. People are under different situations, different levels of stress. Does that carry through to behaviours in gaming?
Oh, I can imagine. And Evie's got one more question as well, which is if you could give one or two specific things that games developers or publishers could do to improve the experience either for women or minorities, or just generally to reduce harnessing, harassing or abusive behaviour, what would that be?
Oh, that's quite a difficult one. So as I mentioned previously, there's no one silver bullet, and there are, it really does need to be, I feel like, a top-down approach as well, a whole of system approach, where everyone needs to be on board. In terms of what can be done right now, like small things you can do right now in the industry, I think it's being very vocal about this not being okay. You need to acknowledge the problem, because I think there will be pockets of people who say, this is not really our core group. It's kind of seen as not as important, but the reality is that it is. And so just being very vocal about where you stand, and your actions speak louder than words. So making sure that if you have a process in place, that you action that.
Totally. So Laura has said, is there any data whether there was a difference to the amount of abuse if women disclose their gender in a match or game compared to if they sort of hide?
I don't believe there was, but I think that's something that we could look at in the future.
Yes, definitely. As I said, yesterday the talk was so much about people hiding. It's really interesting rather than sort of standing up. And, it is sad not to stand up and say, I am a female gamer. It really is. And then Nicola's asked, I'm interested if there could be research into women who've been targeted by false reports to try to get their accounts banned or taken down.
I think this is quite a difficult one. So the process for that would be, we would actually have to identify these women and ask them to participate in the research. And as you can imagine, this can be quite a sensitive topic, and some people might not want to relive that trauma. So I think there could be research done, but we would just have to be very careful about how we approach it.
Totally. And this might have been something that I've got a question. It might be something in your reports that you sort of said, with the abuse, do you finding that it is generally, male or undisclosed kind of genders that are abusing other people, or do you finding other female gamers that are abusing others? We are a big community, and I always feel it's a very positive community, but it's quite interesting to know if it's more related to one gender or another, or.
Yeah, so a lot of it is coming from men, which I guess is why I think it's really important, to my point before, around making sure that everyone is very vocal about what is okay and what is not okay, and making sure your actions speak louder than your words.
I think that's definitely true. Well, I think we're done on questions, but honestly, Anzie, that was so interesting, and thank you so much. I think everyone is now just jumping to the website and downloading the report. We can actually put a link to the report as well on our social media, so Women in Games, LinkedIn, and our other social media there, so that people can have a little look themselves. And I know it's something that we're really conscious of as well in Women in Games. So thank you, honestly, for your time and answering all the lovely questions. So thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak to you all.